Hello, my name is Delilah Guerra, and this is my capstone presentation. The topic we are going to be discussing today is disabled voters and the lawmakers who create laws to prevent access to voting. Disabled individuals have long been subjugated to inaccessible polling places, as well as having to go through many hoops to vote. This is a serious problem that has led to many disabled people being unable to vote in the elections. The problem is often compounded by the fact that many disabled people do not have the same access to transportation as other people, making it difficult for them to get to polling places. This is a major barrier to disabled people's participation in the democratic process. After the accommodations made for almost everyone during the 2020 lockdown, it seems that many states are attempting to pass laws that further restrict on how disabled individuals vote. This is a concerning trend, as it could lead to fewer disabled people being able to participate in the US democracy. The majority of these restrictions have been created and backed by the Republican Party, stating that these bills are there for election integrity and security. With both parties seemingly at head with one another, I will be discussing the situation that is at hand and prescribing possible solutions. Before we start, I wanted to read this quote by Robert M. Hensel. Robert has spina bifida, and I felt that this quote summarizes the conclusion we will come to at the end of this presentation. So his quote is: "There is no greater disability in society than the inability to see a person as more." Part 1: The situation. Why do disabled individuals have a low voter turnout? Before we can answer that question, first let's learn some key terms. First, what is a disability? The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention define a disability as any impairment, physical or mental, that limits an individual's ability to perform daily activities and participate in society. According to the Pew Research Center, more than 56 million Americans live with some form of disability. An estimated 22% of Americans self-reported they have some kind of disability. And of that 22%, half of them reported having difficulty with activities such as walking or using stairs, also concentrating, remembering, and making decisions. Additionally, 19% have difficulty completing errands independent of others. In 2020, the coronavirus prevented many people in the world from being able to do things, such as interacting with each other or going out in public places that we would normally do. This caused many businesses and establishments to accommodate the fact that we had to maintain social distancing. With the elections in 2020, voter turnout from disabled individuals saw an increase compared to the 2016 elections. When comparing it to the 2016 general election, disabled voters' turnout increased by 5.9 points compared to the 5.3-point increase from people without a disability. According to the U.S. Elections Project, nearly 16 million disabled Americans cast their ballots in the presidential election in 2020, representing a 2 million increase from 2016. This is an especially noteworthy development considering the additional barriers posed to disabled persons in the voting process, from inadequate infrastructure to lack of accessibility. It was discovered that the 2020 election had the largest increase in voter turnout so far. People with disabilities are historically more likely to vote by mail than those without disabilities, and are less likely to vote early at a polling place or election office. 53% of disabled voters opted to vote by mail during the 2020 election. The next key term that we are going to be learning is Republican and Republicanism. So, what is a Republican? The Republican Party is one out of the two most well-known political parties in the United States. It was founded in the 1850s by former members of the Whig Party. One major association with this party is conservative social policies. According to new research, the Republican Party believes that states should have more power than the federal government, and that the federal government should not be able to regulate state and local matters. The party also supports a strong national defense and organized prayer in public schools. However, it opposes the legal rights of LGBTQ plus individuals. Republicanism is the political theory that emphasizes freedom as non-denomination, which explains that anyone should be able to live their life without arbitrary interference, contrary However, contrary to this information, there are many examples of the Republican Party being seemingly voting against the rights of individuals with disabilities. Some examples of the voting restrictions imposed by Republican officials is Bill 202, HR 620, and SB 1. In Georgia, Senate Bill 202 was passed in March of 2021. One of the most notable changes was the reduction in the number of voter drop-off boxes to 8, with the requirement that they be located inside buildings. This may present difficulties for disabled voters who may have difficulty accessing an inside location. HR 620, which aimed to prevent disabled individuals from immediately attempting to go to court for the discrimination and instead press them to ask for it to be fixed or changed in a timely manner. This bill was a direct response to the Supreme Court's ruling in 2015 that disabled individuals could not bring a lawsuit under the ADA unless they first gave the business alleged to be in violation of the ADA a chance to remedy the problem. However, the problem with this ruling, as many disability advocates pointed out, was that it gave businesses little incentive to comply with the ADA in a timely manner. The last example is the Texas bill passed in 2021. SB 1 attempts to put an increase on voting hours in smaller Republican-run countries. However, it restricts how and when voters can cast their vote. It also affects how individuals can vote by mail and gives poll watchers more rights while inside polling places. With this information at hand, one can presume that the Republican Party is not questioning if disabled individuals deserve rights, but rather of how much rights do they actually deserve. Part 2, Diagnosing the Situation: Ethical Issues in Voter Suppression. There are many ethical issues that disabled people face on a daily basis. One of the biggest issues is accessibility. Many disabled people are not able to access the same opportunities as non-disabled people. This can be a result of physical barriers such as buildings not being wheelchair accessible, or attitudinal barriers such as people not being willing to make accommodation for disabled people. This lack of accessibility can lead to social isolation and exclusion, which can have a major impact on a person's mental health. Disabled people are also more likely to experience abuse and exploitation. This is often due to the fact that they are seen as more vulnerable and less capable than non-disabled people. In slide 7, I explained that Republican Party is not against disabled individuals having rights, but they are cautious of the number of rights they can have. One major belief system held in Republican conservative groups is that Americans need to work hard for what they want in life. In general, Republicans and those who lean Republican are less supportive of increasing government assistance to people in need. It is also found that nearly 80% of Republicans and Republican leaners believe that most people can make it if they just work hard. Individuals that identify as Republican and believed in conservative ideology were more likely to believe that voter fraud, theft, and impersonation are rampant in American elections. Voter suppression is a deliberate attempt to keep people from voting. It has been used throughout history to keep certain groups from having a say in their government. In the U.S., voter suppression has been used to keep people of color, disabled, and impoverished individuals from voting. Voter suppression is a form of discrimination that has been used to keep minority groups from having an equal say in our democracy. Voter ID laws are one of the most common forms of voter suppression. These laws require people to show a form of identification that can be difficult for some people to obtain. In addition to driver's license and passports, states also issue non-driver ID cards. However, disabled people are less likely to hold these forms of identification. Driver's licenses are out of reach for people with disabilities, and barriers to travel make passports unnecessary. Part 3, Ableism: Challenging or Ableism. Ableism is the act of being discriminatory or prejudiced against individuals with disabilities. People are often said to be ableist when they discriminate against or make negative assumptions about people with disabilities. There are many reasons why people might do this, including ignorance, fear, and a lack of understanding about what it means to have a disability. Some people may also believe that people with disabilities are not as capable as those without, and so they may not give them the same opportunities or respect. This can lead to a feeling of inferiority and isolation among people with disabilities, which can further perpetuate the cycle of discrimination. The privilege of all kinds, including ableism, shapes society. Ableism is a pervasive form of discrimination that intersects with other forms of oppression, such as sexism, racism, and Christian privilege. Social learning theory is something that can be used to effectively challenge ableism. Albert Bandura created the social learning theory. According to his theory, we learn from our interactions with those around us and our social day to day activities. Social learning theory is therefore founded on observation, imitation, and modeling. Social learning theory posits that individuals learn by observing and imitating the behavior of others. Social learning theory can be used to explain discrepancies and disparities between dominant and subordinate social identity groups and can be used to improve or reform ableist culture by educating those with able bodied privilege about their unearned privilege and how that plays into reinforcing an ableist culture. Another way to challenge ableism is to ensure that people with disabilities are included in all aspects of society, from the classroom to the workplace. It is also necessary to provide resources and support for those with disabilities, such as accessible education and employment opportunities. Additionally, we should strive to create an environment that values the contributions of people with disabilities and to promote an understanding of disability as a natural part of diversity. Finally, it is essential to challenge language that dehumanizes and marginalizes people with disabilities, as well as to work to create a more inclusive society for everyone. By taking these steps, we can work together to challenge ableism and create a more equitable and respectful society. Acknowledging and challenging ableism is the only way to ensure equality for everyone in this situation. We must educate ourselves and others on the issues of ableism, find ways to make accommodation for people with disabilities, and create an environment where everyone can reach their full potential. As we saw in the 2020 elections, these accommodations are possible and achievable. Additionally, we must ensure the voices of those affected by ableism are heard and understood. Only by doing this can we create a society where all individuals are recognized and valued. Furthermore, by challenging ableism, we can help to break down the barriers that exist and allow for the full inclusion of all in our society. Equality is the goal, and we can only achieve that